There you go. So we'll
Great.
start. So we will start up. So thank you for being here. This is Dan Young, Startup Grind Wilmington. Our guest today is Gayle Gibson, who's going to teach us a little bit about kind of her background as it pertains to life in the C-suite, but also as an entrepreneur. So Gayle, first of all, thank you for being here. I think one of the first things I'd love to start out with, you've had such an incredibly diverse career. Uh, but let's start a little bit of the genesis. Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how maybe some things in your upbringing led to you being, a successful leader?
Yeah, boy, that's a big question and an important reflection, I think, for anybody to do. So first off, I guess I've figured out after many, many years, I really am an engineer. I'm a trained engineer. I practice as an engineer, but I do approach problem solving that way. And I have a chemical engineering degree with an MBA. So that business side, initially I wasn't sure that I wanted that, but I looked back and see how that really, really helps. Um, I've lived in a lot of different states: West Virginia, Texas, Connecticut, Oklahoma, and now Delaware. I call home. I've lived here longer than any other state. Also lived overseas in Switzerland. So anybody that gets the chance to live overseas, it's you really learn about a country and a culture in a very different way living there rather than vacationing. So I think that I highly recommend that. Something fun, I guess, before I turned 50, my brother and I sort of had a little interaction, and he was trying to visit all 50 states before he turned 50. And I I was 5 years younger, so I had a lot more time to do that. So I was proud to say I've slept in all 50 states before I turned 50, but also visited all the continents.
Mm-hmm.
And that traveling is great as well. People ask me, do I have a favorite? And I really don't, because I learned through all that to find something special about everywhere and something to appreciate. From a career standpoint, maybe real quickly, I'd say there were 4 jobs that I really loved looking back and really didn't want to change those jobs. And it was really someone that came knocking and said, well, we'd like to have you do this, And initially, when you're doing something you love, you sort of go, I'm not sure I want to. But, I guess wisdom prevailed. I listened to some others and moved on. My first love was really R&D. And I found within the realm of research and development, I like scale up. So as a process engineer, if you will, how do you take something that's kind of been developed in a lab and scale that up? So not only is it efficient and effective, it delivers what the customer needs, but you can also make money at it, right? The second job I loved that I did was manufacturing. I did technology, but I really like manufacturing management because you think, oh, it's about equipment and production, which it is, but it's really about people. You're interacting with people all the time, all day long, trying to learn how, what their challenges is, what's not working for them, and trying to do the best you can to guide them as a leader. The next job I really loved was product management. And I think you'd appreciate that, Dan, because I realized it's at the nexus of a lot of different functions. To do product management well, you have to understand R&D, you have to understand marketing, customers, product stewardship, manufacturing, supply chain, and financials. You're trying to drive value as a product manager. And I just love being kind of in that nexus of these different pieces and really see how it all pulled together. The last one, I kept getting into jobs later in my career that I essentially would call transformational change. Whether it was around getting a $2 billion business to work on growing revenue better, transformational change in supply chain or business processes, but also things like leadership behaviors, diversity. I was responsible for driving some of those changes in very large businesses within a multinational company. And that taught me a lot, again, not only about practices and transactions, but also people and behaviors. So, from a startup perspective, yes, my career was mainly in a large multinational company. But even those have lots of pivots, lots of changes. We're in a world today where nothing is constant. You don't go in there and just stay there for 35 years. Or if you do, you're lucky enough to found your passion and stick with it. But many changes that I had in my career, many choices. and saw businesses, I was involved with businesses that didn't do well. I was involved in cleaning up things from businesses that went out of business within this large multinational, and, learned about what you should and should not leave behind. But, looking at a multinational and how do you do innovation and growth? How do you create something new? How do you bring this new thing to the world, get it to customers? And the choices and alignment that you have to have, not to mention investments. I learned, sort of in that innovation area, you take these sort of stair steps up a ladder. You've got to understand the marketplace. You've got to have a concept for what you can do. You got to have capability to deliver it. And then, you kind of go from there, and you might be lucky enough, right, to be successful and have a bigger arena, more revenue, more profit. But it's kind of that learning ladder that I really like. And now I am involved with a couple startups sort of in a consultancy area, and part of a partnership.
Excellent, excellent. And also for the folks who are coming in to the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A section, and we'll make sure to ask those different questions at the end. So we had talked before, and you shared some really interesting stories, as we'll call it, from the C-suite. And a couple of them were really based on working for leaders that had a very maybe unique to me, maybe not unique to you, way of helping to prepare their companies or their groups for best case scenario, worst case scenario. Could you tell some of those different stories from the C-suite that you encountered, and some of the things that you learned from them?
Yeah, I became chief of staff for the chair of the board and CEO about 6 months prior to the Great Recession hitting. So people might remember Lehman weekend in September 2008. And those 6 months before that, we were also dealing with a coming CEO transition. So the new CEO got named essentially Lehman weekend. But leading up to that, the CEO I was working for saw trends that he saw something coming. He interacted with a lot of different people around the globe, in China, Asia, Europe. And not just other businesses, and CEOs, it's also banks and insurance companies. And he saw very concerning trends. And he would come back from some trips and just, kind of, we'd essentially kick around, how do we get our leaders in this company to see that, right? And the challenge, we tried a couple different things. One was we brought in Ram Shriram. And Ram helped us with, it was a smaller group of sort of senior business leaders, so say senior vice presidents and above. And he did some interactions to try to help us. But the phrase I remember is, you've got to help business teams build muscle. And that really struck me, because for folks that maybe haven't been through something or couldn't see this trend, how do you help them see it and then know how to respond to it, right? There's awareness of it, but there's also the action that ultimately becomes more important. And, that was somewhat successful. And a month after that, he had us gather, and I usually was the one leading these things to bring people together, but the corporate officers across the whole company, so 65 vice presidents and above. And the CEO would outline, I want you to go back and plan for your business or function on 3 scenarios. In the next 3 months, if things decline by 5% or 10% or 30%. And you could almost hear snickers at that 30%. Nobody ever thought that was in the realm of feasibility. They thought this was a paper exercise. Why are we doing this? If it's just more cost cutting, let's just do it. And they all did the exercise, but maybe that didn't have the effect we had hoped. Looking back, 6 months later, there was a 30% decline in revenue. So, some of the people reflected after that, like, wow, we should have probably listened more and paid attention. The more interesting thing that was a third attempt, if you will, is we gathered 89 business directors. So these are the people with profit and loss responsibilities within this large company. So these are the people making the decisions, right? They're there. And we showed them a lot of trend data about the economy, about markets, about value chains and what's going on, had the economists talk, had them do some scenarios at a table. But I remember sitting at a table, we did 3 different sessions, and some of them were just really struggling with, I don't see how this trend relates to my business. So some of them might have come from operations, manufacturing. They might have been focused on very much on their transactional customer and not looking further down, the value chain.
Mhm.
And they just didn't hear any issues with their transactional customer. Some of the business directors came out of R&D, right? And they had a thirst for new product. If we have something new, we'll sell it. Whether, that was bringing in the cash at the right times. This is one of the challenges sometimes of a large multinational. If you're cash rich, that makes people a little, not lazy, but just they get very comfortable, right? With cash is always there. The other kind of business director was in sales, and they would say, well, they're very good at relationship selling, but in terms of down the value chain and the trends, they just didn't see the connect. And I guess I walked away from that with this power of a lot of consultants talking 2x2 grids. But if you think about a 2x2 around your knowledge level and your awareness of that knowledge. So there's, in one grid, what you know, right? In another one, you don't know what you know. Those are both very good places to be, right? It's a good awareness. Then you've got sort of that maybe danger quadrant of you don't know what you don't know. And that's what we were seeing come into play of these folks. And you can't really fault someone. They don't know what they don't know. The challenge was how to help them see it, realize it, and then get beyond that to know what to act on. And I think about startups, where you're in a world where you'd love to know lots, right? To have a great business plan, but you can only afford to know a few things because of your resources or time. And then you got to pick what are those critical one or two things I need to know for my company in the next 6 months, or 3 months or 12 months. And that to me is a really distinguishing difference of how do you bring all your business acumen to those choices. And I guess whether it's a startup, standalone company, or with even a growth item within a multinational, that is a key differentiating skill, I think, of knowing what you don't know and then knowing what you need to know and when you need to know it. So hope that is one example.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. And you talked about kind of getting into your own consulting after those experiences. Can you tell us a little bit about your initiative that you're working on right now, your diversity initiative?
Yeah, I'm part of a startup called Accordant Advisors. We're in the area of pulling on clients, so we'd love to have your interest. Essentially, we are focused on inclusion. Yes, we deal in the realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we feel like inclusion, is really something that makes the difference. In some ways, if you can have diversity, but if you don't have inclusion, it kind of doesn't make a difference.
Right.
And even equity as well. So we bring skills that we feel are very different in terms of emotional intelligence for leaders to really learn to how to make their cultures different in their organization. Diversity, equity, inclusion, we can always look at numbers and be very metrics driven or even symbolic with doing a MLK event every year. But it's really, how does it feel to the employee or the individuals in that culture? I'm an out lesbian. I worked for years trying to help my own company that I was a part of kind of go on that journey around LGBTQ, and had to really reflect a lot on people don't know what they don't know sometimes, and you can educate them. And sometimes there's underlying beliefs that take quite a bit of discussion. And emotional intelligence for leaders really helps them have those conversations, in the wake of last summer and George Floyd's murder and so many other challenges. These are tough conversations, and helping to equip leaders to have those conversations is really, really important. The second thing we bring is what we call stakeholder value exchange. You don't really change a culture without thinking about different stakeholders and what they're going to gain or feel like they might not gain from some change that's about to take place. And you really got to kind of examine each stakeholder group. And that's what our firm helps organizations do.
And I definitely appreciate all those different points. I've in the time that I've worked in any sort of initiative like this, I've generally said that diversity to me was less important than just being a really good recruiter and saying here's who I want to work with, and then sending those marketing messages out to a diverse set of people. And the people who respond to those marketing messages, then they come in, and then, like you said, the inclusion is what leads to equity. So I'm not even sure why equity usually goes in front of inclusion, to be honest with you, because unless I feel included, there's no way I'm going to feel equal to anyone. So I definitely am glad you were championing that. Um,
Yeah, Dan, and you know very well. I mean, there is so much data now, the business case around diversity, but it does make a difference in innovation, right?
mhm,
If you and I are trying to work on something new, or approach a new client or customer with a new offering, and we're not feeling comfortable to kick around what we think authentically and really share wild ideas, right?
mhm,
If I'm nervous that you'll shoot me down and all this stuff, I mean, we know, and data shows that makes a difference, right? In
mhm,
innovation, it makes a difference in the bottom line of companies to have more diverse groups, but you just don't have it, right? It takes work to make people feel included.
mhm.
And that, I think, is some of the secret sauce that to everybody really benefiting from diversity.
Absolutely. And whether it be in the inclusion efforts, or in the work that you obviously play as a mentor and as a consultant to so many businesses in Delaware, are there some trends to entrepreneurship that you're seeing in the state of Delaware in terms of either more money, more interest, more time moving towards specific types of companies, types of businesses, types of missions?
Um, I don't know that I fully have my thumb on the pulse of all of Delaware, but what I do see out in the world, and not just the startup firm I'm involved with, I'm also advising a couple, was on a board of one as well that I got off of. But I think there are some sort of observations. I'll put it that way.
Mhm,
One is you really do have to think about your purpose. This is so easy to say. It's easy to put something wordy on paper, but talking with startups at certain phases, sometimes people are in it as a hobby, and that's okay. And they just, don't want to lose a lot of money, or they want a tax write-off, you know, but getting clear that it's a hobby and knowing that is different than just sort of, spinning your wheels at it. Some people really want to optimize value and drive profits, right? Maybe they want to sell it out and get a lot of money. I remember kind of consulting with one here in Delaware, and it seemed among a number of us were thinking that their optimization for value was just to basically do a little more work and sell it out to larger
mhm,
players. And you could tell they really didn't want to do that. But
mhm,
they need to figure out why they don't want to do that, right? Maybe they have a technology advantage they haven't reaped yet, but really understand maybe they're not there to maximize value. So really getting clear on that purpose, at least for that stage. I think the other one is around values. The opportunity to sort of build from the ground up what values you want to instill in an organization. And it's maybe hard to do on top of everything else, right? Getting clients and having cash and customers. But I do think that's really important. I guess the last is, classic stuff that you probably teach your students, but who the customer is, who's the decision maker, right? And making
mhm,
sure you can put your pitches in business language sometimes. Um, a lot of people get passionate about their technology,
mhm.
but they might not be able to put it in the language of business in order to get the kind of funding they need. And that is always, you can find people to help you do that. But I think there's not maybe enough of that to get it to
Mhm.
that next stage, is my view.
Makes sense. So, and this is kind of a less of a specific business question and just more of just to tap into your own interests and thoughts, and how you perceive yourself with all the different things that you have done, from the C-suite to entrepreneurship to inclusion initiatives. What is it that ultimately, 100 years from now, you'd like to be remembered for?
Oh, wow. At the end of the day, I think it's the engineer in me that says make a difference.
Mhm,
Sometimes making a difference is in your family lives. Sometimes it's in in the business world. Sometimes it's just helping someone to see something differently. The challenge sometimes with that is you often don't know. When I work on large transformational changes, you have to look over a time constant of years, not days. And one thing you can do, and I don't really seek, the accolades, but it's seek that feedback. I've had several people years later sort of ping me and go, you were the best manager I ever had. And it's really striking because, you sit there years later and go, what did I do? It's often not one thing, it's often a combination of things. I think some of my work around diversity, being an out LGBTQ, taught me to listen better. You can argue with people and want them to be different, but until you hear their perspective, try to walk in their shoes, that is an awareness level that helps really me with everything I do. Really truly listening. And I think as leaders and entrepreneurs, right, really listen to clients, really listen to your employees. And sometimes our heads get so busy with what we want to say rather than are we really hearing it? One thing I do from time to time is try to get balcony time. I used to do it on airplanes. Don't do that anymore because of COVID. But for leaders, finding a way, and it's just so hard to get a little time out in terms of how do I reflect and get above what I'm doing with my, let's say, the workplace, and just sort of purview the field. Is this really going how I like? Are we really hitting the mark? Or, do I need to help person A or B? That balcony time and reflection. And it doesn't have to be, days, but find time to do that is really important because then you're kind of becoming your own advisor in a way. So those are some thoughts.
And actually to build on that, as someone who has done all these different things and literally traveled the world, and probably more than anyone I've ever heard of before, and is still operating at a high level, what does Gayle Gibson do to let her hair down and relax and decompress?
Oh, well, I'm still learning that, right? I learned several years ago with a health issue that, okay, got to invest in yourself. So the physical aspect is important. I do yoga 3 times a week, lift weights, make sure I go for walks, enjoying beautiful days like today. The second is sort of, your mental. I'm as an engineer, I'm curious and mental, so I like reading and new things and kicking around with other people. But the third is also the spiritual, and whatever that means for you, whether it's just enjoying a spring day or prayers or reflection or meditations, whatever that means for you. And those three things, I think I've learned I need. And sometimes I realize with my own balcony time that they get out of balance. I might tend to, especially when I was working every day, at a sort of not a 9 to 5, but you know what I mean, job. Those were definitely getting out of balance. And it's easier now that I'm a little more in charge of my own time. So.
Wonderful. And the last question for you is obviously with the startup grind community, how can we help to support you? What can we do to help you and your new business, or just in general your mission? What are kind of some directives that we can take to help Gayle Gibson?
Oh, well, yeah, we're happy to have clients around
Right?
diversity, inclusion, and equity. If you want to kind of go on a cultural journey with us. I'm also really more awake around climate. Those of you that are really working for climate solutions, it's something we all need, and we all need to do together. It's a systemic problem, right? And one little point solution's not going to do it. We all need to find our role. I guess I don't have a specific ask. I guess, try to have patience and treat people the best you can. We all lose our patience. We all get angry. We all get polarized in the United States, particularly with the political situation. But, try to take a pause and give people a break and truly listen, I think is key. What I'm excited about looking forward, is what I get involved with is the startups, but there's really new things coming. It's really exciting to look to the future despite all the problems. 21st century leadership is different. we've been doing things an old way for too long, and that's not going to work in the future. And I think the future workforce is demanding something different. And when we're figuring all that out as we go through COVID as well, it's probably a good intervention we've had in some regard. People, I think you need to treasure them. If you're leaders of a company, I think too often we just think we can hire the talent or we can find it, or uh, certain talent you need at certain times is more special than I think we realize. And I think it will get more so as the workforce continues to change. So treasure your people as key resources, just like you would a piece of equipment or something else you're acquiring. The technology is hugely exciting. It's hugely scary in terms of the speed of change. And some of the technologies out there could be threats, but I think as a leader, you got to learn to sort of figure out how to cannibalize your own product line. That's the old product manager in me talking. And
Mhm.
that's so hard to do, but the speed of things these days is so different. If you're not thinking about your next and next product offering, then you're probably going to become, more obsolete than you want to be, faster than you want. And I guess the last area that, given the challenges we see in the world today, I think businesses and government have to find ways to work together differently. These things like climate or even socioeconomic situation, even medical care, businesses need talent. They need people that are ready to come to work, right? Or fed or educated. And we've got to find ways to have government work with businesses to help enable things that can solve some of these big challenges. So I think it's got to be a new realm of businesses and government working together in some regard. So that's also something I'm starting to invest a little time in. So
That makes a ton of sense. We don't have anything in the Q&A section, so we will finish up for today. Gayle, thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey with us, and we will make sure that we direct every and all resources to you, especially in the area of inclusion. So this is Dan Young signing off from Startup Grind Wilmington. Have a great day, and as Gayle mentioned, a beautiful day. So take care.
thank you.